My name is Daniel. I am 44 years old, a mechanic by trade, and for most of my life I thought of myself as a simple man. I believed in work, in sweat, in the way grease under your fingernails could tell you that you had earned your bread that day. I never thought of myself as ambitious. I wasn't chasing riches. I only wanted something solid, a roof that did not leak, a family that did not drift, a life where what you gave came back to you in love and respect. When I met Laura, she was 35, divorced, and carrying the weight of 3 children on her shoulders. Michael was 13, Hannah 11, and Sam just 9. I still remember the first time I saw them all together. They lived in a tired little rental, the kind of house that sagged under its own neglect. The roof leaked whenever it rained, the paint peeled like old scabs, the windows rattled in their frames. Their father, Tom, was nowhere to be seen, and even when his name came up, it was always tied to excuses, broken promises, and child support checks that never arrived. I should have walked away. I had my own modest life. At the time, I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment near the shop where I worked. I was saving for a house of my own, something plain but steady, something that would finally mean I had built a corner of the world with my own hands. But when I saw Laura, when I saw the kids trying to make do with so little, something in me shifted. I thought maybe this was my purpose. Not just to own a house, but to give them one. Not just to save for myself, but to save them. So I did it. I threw my savings into a down payment and signed my name on a mortgage that would bind me for decades. The house I chose wasn't grand, but it was spacious, 4 bedrooms, a yard big enough for a swing set, a kitchen where you could actually move without bumping into each other. It smelled of new paint and fresh wood when we moved in, the air sharp with possibility. I told myself this was the beginning of something good. I covered the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities. Laura promised she would handle groceries and day-to-day household needs, and I believed her. At first, everything seemed to balance. The kids finally had their own rooms. Michael no longer had to share with Sam, and Hannah finally had a door she could close when she wanted privacy. I remember the first evening we unpacked. Michael sat on the floor of his new room, touching the walls like he couldn't believe they were real. Hannah twirled in the open space, laughing as though she had stepped into a dream. Sam curled up in the corner with a book, his small voice whispering that this room was his forever. I wanted to give them more than walls. I built a computer setup for Michael, a desk, a decent chair, a monitor bright enough to light his whole face at night. For Hannah, I cleared out part of the basement and made her a little dance studio with mirrors and a bar I drilled into the wall. For Sam, I set up shelves and filled them with books I thought he might love. It wasn't just the house. I gave them my time, my energy. I drove them to school in the mornings, picked them up when Laura was busy, sat in the bleachers during games and recitals. I fixed their bikes when chains snapped or tires burst. I spent late nights hunched over the kitchen table, helping with math problems I barely remembered from my own school days. When Michael turned 16, I taught him how to drive, letting him grind my clutch and stall my car until he got the hang of it. With Hannah, I helped her build models for her biology projects, even staying up past midnight to get them right. For Sam, I found a math tutor when he started to slip, paying out of my own pocket because I didn't want him to feel behind. The truth is, I believed in effort. I believed that if you showed up, if you poured love and work into people, they would eventually see you, appreciate you, maybe even love you back. That belief guided every choice I made. Over the years, the expenses piled up, but I never questioned them. Summer camps, sports programs, dance lessons, music classes, birthday parties that left the kitchen table crowded with gifts and cake. I paid for braces, for doctor visits, for health insurance that cost more than my own car payment. Every receipt, every bill, every late-night worry over how to make ends meet felt like part of a bigger plan. The building of a family that would one day stand on solid ground because of me. Sometimes I would stand in the doorway at night, watching them sleep. Michael sprawled across his bed, headphones still around his neck. Hannah curled under her blanket, her hair spread across the pillow. Sam with a book still open on his chest. In those moments, I told myself it was worth it. I told myself they were safe, they were cared for, and one day they would know who made that possible. Laura would lie beside me, whispering that I was doing more than enough, that she didn't know what she would do without me. And I believed her. I believed every word because I wanted to. I wanted to think I had finally found my place, that the love I was giving was creating roots, weaving me into their lives as something more than just mom's boyfriend. Years passed and I kept investing. Each time Michael asked for something new software, new sports gear, I said yes. When Hannah wanted extra dance lessons, I paid without hesitation. When Sam struggled in school, I bought him resources, tutors, books, anything that might help. My hands were always stained with grease from the shop. My back ached from long hours under cars. But when I came home, I carried groceries, repaired leaks, cooked meals. I thought it was adding up to something. I thought one day they would look at me and see more than a man who had moved in with their mother. I thought they might see a father, not in name maybe, but in truth. But looking back now, with the clarity of hindsight, I realized something I refused to see then. I was building a house on shifting sand. I was giving everything to people who accepted it as if it were air, as if it were the natural order of things. They never asked me to sacrifice. They never thanked me for the late nights, the bills, the sweat, and yet I convinced myself their silence meant comfort, that their indifference meant stability. I told myself love was patient. I told myself family was earned. I told myself that every dollar I spent, every hour I gave, was another brick in the foundation of belonging. I was wrong. At the time, though, I didn't know it. All I knew was the work, the endless giving, and I carried it gladly, blind to the truth that would one day shatter me. The shift was not sudden. That's what made it worse. It wasn't one explosion, one cruel phrase that cut me down in an instant. It was a slow erosion, like rust eating through steel, quiet, steady, inevitable. At first I thought it was just adolescence. Michael stopped saying thank you when I bought him things. He would tear open a package of new shoes, toss the box aside, and walk away without a word. Hannah rolled her eyes when I tried to help her with homework, sighing like my presence was a burden. Sam, the boy I thought was closest to me, started calling me Daniel again. No longer Dan or the affectionate nicknames he'd once used. Little things, but little things accumulate. At family gatherings, when relatives asked the kids about their household, they spoke only of their mother and each other. Mom got us this. Mom takes us there. I was invisible. My name disappeared from their stories as though I were nothing more than a piece of furniture in the house I paid for. I brought it up with Laura more than once. Each time she brushed it off. They're just teenagers, she said, her voice carrying that dismissive calm that always made me feel foolish for even noticing. It's a phase. They'll grow out of it. But they didn't. Michael began shutting his door whenever I walked past. Music blasting from speakers I had bought him. Hannah came home later and later from dance rehearsals, throwing me curt nods instead of conversation. Sam retreated into his own world, polite but distant, speaking to me only when he needed something fixed or bought. The silence hurt more than anger would have. Anger means you matter. Silence means you don't exist. I kept telling myself it would change after the wedding. Laura and I had been together long enough. It was time to formalize what we already lived. I thought that once I became her husband, they would see me differently, not just as the man paying the bills, but as a permanent fixture, someone they could not ignore. The day of the wedding came. It was small, modest, nothing extravagant. I didn't want extravagance. I wanted meaning. Laura wore a simple white dress, her smile radiant enough to make me forget the doubts I had been carrying. The ceremony itself was brief, a few vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers. I remember looking at her and thinking, this is it, the start of everything I've been working toward. But even on that day, shadows lingered. At the reception, I overheard Hannah whispering to one of her friends. Her voice was sharp, dismissive, the way only teenagers can be when they think adults aren't listening. Mom married Daniel because he pays for everything. The words lodged in my chest like shrapnel. I froze where I stood, holding a plate of food I suddenly couldn't eat. That was what she saw me as, not a stepfather, not a man who had given her stability and space to chase her dreams, but a wallet, a transaction. I told myself it was just one careless sentence. I tried to swallow it, to bury it, but it didn't end there. Later at dinner, after the toasts and laughter had died down, Michael turned to me with that cold teenage stare, the kind that strips away every layer of hope. "Just because you married Mom doesn't make you our dad," he said flatly. Hannah smirked and added, "Our dad is Tom." And then Sam, my Sam, the boy I thought I had reached, the one who had once clung to me with trust in his eyes, he delivered the final cut. "You're just Mom's helper." Laura was there. She heard it all. She stayed silent. She didn't defend me, didn't correct them, didn't so much as flinch. She just sat there, letting their words hang in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't even realized had started. I looked around that table, at the faces of the children I had raised, at the woman I had just vowed my life to, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. The vows, the rings, the ceremony, it had changed nothing. To them, I was still the outsider, still the man whose labor funded their comforts, but whose presence held no weight. I smiled through the rest of the evening. I posed for photographs, I cut the cake, I danced with Laura. But inside, something cracked. The days after the wedding felt colder than the days before. The children withdrew further, as though my new title as husband made me less tolerable, not more. Michael spoke to me only when absolutely necessary, his voice clipped, dismissive. Hannah mocked me in small ways, jokes whispered under her breath to her friends when I dropped her off at dance. Sam avoided eye contact, his words minimal, his distance widening. When I confronted Laura, she sighed as if I were exhausting her. "Daniel, stop taking everything so seriously. They're kids, they'll come around." But they didn't. Instead, they grew bolder. They laughed at my attempts to discipline them, ignoring my instructions until Laura repeated them. They refused to introduce me to their friends as anything more than Mom's husband. At family gatherings, when relatives asked about their father, they always said Dad, meaning Tom, the man who had abandoned them, the man who contributed nothing. It became clear that no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I built, I would never be seen as family, not by them. And Laura, her silence spoke louder than any defense she might have offered. I started noticing the looks she gave me when I complained, the tightness in her jaw, the way her patience seemed to wear thin whenever I brought up the disrespect. She wasn't on my side. Not really. She was on theirs. The house I had bought, the home I had filled with my labor and my money, began to feel like a cage. I walked its halls at night, listening to the sound of their laughter drifting from rooms I had provided, and I realized something that terrified me. I was more alone married than I had ever been single. I had thought the wedding would cement me into their lives. Instead, it made my invisibility permanent. And so the years that followed the wedding were marked not by closeness, but by distance. My authority meant nothing. My presence was tolerated at best, mocked at worst. I became a stranger in the family I had built. Looking back now, I see that the wedding wasn't the beginning of unity. It was the confirmation of my exile, a reminder that no matter how much I gave, I would never be enough. And yet I stayed. I kept paying, kept working, kept showing up. Because I was stubborn, because I still believed, foolishly, that one day they would see me, that one day Laura would stand by me, that one day my sacrifices would matter. I was wrong, but it would take years and one brutal night for me to finally understand how wrong I was. It didn't happen all at once. For years, I swallowed their silence, their dismissal, their cutting remarks. I told myself I was strong enough to endure it, that patience would turn contempt into respect. But patience has its limits. Love has its limits. Even endurance eventually cracks. The breaking point came on an ordinary evening, the kind where I should have been invisible, fixing dinner in the kitchen while the kids huddled in the living room. I had come home early that day, grease still under my fingernails, shoulders aching from a 12-hour shift. I walked through the back door quietly, unnoticed. That's when I heard them. They were in the living room, sprawled across the couches I had paid for, bathed in the glow of the television I had bought, their voices sharp with laughter. They didn't know I was there. "He thinks he's in charge," Michael sneered, his tone dripping with mockery. This is really our house. He needs to know his place. Hannah giggled. Yeah, he acts like he owns us or something. Like just because he pays, he gets to tell us what to do. Then Michael's voice again, louder this time, triumphant. He's just a cash machine. And they laughed. They laughed as though my entire existence was a joke. I stood in the hallway, every muscle locked, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath felt heavy, poisoned. In that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was emptiness and understanding so absolute it hollowed me out. They saw me not as a father, not as family, not even as a man deserving respect. I was a wallet with legs, a cash machine with a face. I didn't step into the room. I didn't confront them. I turned, walked to the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the floorboards. My hands trembled, but not with rage, with clarity. That night I knew the truth. I had been living a lie. A month later, the lie shattered completely. We were at dinner, plates of food set on the table, the hum of conversation brittle and false. Michael leaned back in his chair, his voice casual but sharp enough to draw blood. You're not family. You have no authority here. Hannah's eyes flashed, daring me to contradict her. Yeah, you're just mom's husband, not our dad, not even close. Sam, the one I thought was closest to me, delivered the final blow. You're not family. Stop pretending. The words landed like knives. Laura sat silent, her eyes fixed on her plate, refusing to intervene. My wife, the woman I had sacrificed everything for, let her children cut me down in my own home, at my own table. I looked at them all in that moment, really looked. Their faces twisted with arrogance, with certainty. They believed every word they spoke, and I understood. The game was over. I stood up slowly, setting down my fork. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound harsh in the silence. All right, I said softly, my voice calm, almost too calm, if that's how it is. I left the table. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't explain. I simply walked away. The next morning I acted. I cut off the internet, pulled the plug and canceled the provider. I called the phone company and shut down the lines I had been funding. I canceled the bank cards, the allowances, every account that tied my labor to their luxuries. Hannah's dance classes gone. Michael's car insurance canceled. Sam's tutor dismissed with a polite but final phone call. In less than 24 hours, I dismantled the scaffolding of comfort they had built on my back. The reaction was immediate. Michael stormed into the kitchen, waving his dead phone in my face. What the hell did you do? My service is cut off. Hannah shrieked from the basement, her voice trembling with rage. My dance lessons are canceled. They said I can't come back unless we pay. Sam appeared in the hallway, his eyes wide with disbelief. The tutor said we're not paying him anymore. What's going on? I looked at each of them, calm as stone. I stopped paying. All of it. Their outrage collided in the air, a chorus of disbelief and fury. You can't do that, Michael shouted. You're ruining everything, Hannah screamed. You promised. Sam's voice cracked. I cut him off. I promised nothing. You made it clear I'm not family, and if I'm not family, I have no obligations. Laura finally stepped in, her face flushed, her voice trembling. Daniel, what are you doing? They're kids. They didn't mean it. But I had heard enough excuses. They meant every word. They've been meaning it for years, and now they get to live with the truth they created. The days that followed were chaos. The kids stormed through the house like caged animals, furious at the collapse of their comfortable lives. Michael accused me of betrayal, shouting that I had no right to pull the rug out from under them. Hannah cried, not because she understood the damage she had done, but because her world of rehearsals and costumes was suddenly gone. Sam pleaded, his voice trembling. But even then I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sorry for how he had treated me. He was sorry for losing the benefits. Laura wept at night, begged me to reconsider. Just restore the internet, she whispered. At least let them have that. They're teenagers, Daniel. They don't understand what they're saying. But I did not bend. If they're old enough to declare I'm not family, then they're old enough to live without my money. I watched as the house turned colder, the silence broken only by slammed doors and muffled arguments. They accused me of cruelty, of betrayal, of heartlessness. But I knew the truth. The betrayal had been theirs all along. And in the quiet that followed their screams, I felt something strange. Not guilt, not regret, but relief. For the first time in years, I was no longer a prisoner to their expectations. I had drawn the line, and I would not step back over it. When you finally stop giving, when you finally say no after years of endless yes, the silence that follows is deafening. Their anger, their tears, their accusations, they had burned out within weeks, leaving behind something heavier. The realization that I was serious, that my withdrawal wasn't a tantrum or a temporary punishment, it was permanent. I spent nights at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and receipts, tracing the history of my own devotion. I dug through folders of bank statements, contracts, old insurance documents. Numbers stared back at me like ghosts. Line after line, payment after payment, a decade of sacrifice laid bare in black ink. When I tallied the total, my hands trembled. Nearly $500,000. That was what I had poured into them, into Laura, into her children, into a family that had never once spoken my name with pride. $500,000 gone. Not into savings, not into investments, not into a future of my own, but into their comfort, their hobbies, their endless needs. I made copies of the documents, neat stacks of evidence, and one evening I handed them to Laura. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is what I've given. This is what I've carried." She flipped through the pages, her eyes widening with each line. "Daniel, this is $500,000, I finished. $500,000 that bought me nothing but contempt." She set the papers down, her face pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm selling the house," I said. "It's over. I won't fund this anymore. I won't live in a place where I am treated as nothing. You and the kids can find another roof. I'm done." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not regret, only clarity. Within a month, the house was on the market. I packed my things into boxes, each item a reminder of years wasted. Tools from the garage, clothes from the dresser, a few personal mementos I had clung to through it all. Everything else, the furniture, the television, the decorations remained. I had bought it all, but I left it behind. Let them choke on the comfort they once mocked me for providing. When the papers were signed, I moved into a small apartment. One bedroom, modest, plain. It reminded me of the life I had before them, the life where my money was mine, where my work bought me peace instead of contempt. Laura and the kids moved in with her sister. Tom, their biological father, vanished again. He had no interest in stepping up, no means to fill the void I had left. The children had defended his name for years, claimed his blood made him their real father. Now they had to live with the truth. Blood doesn't pay bills. Blood doesn't fix roofs. Blood doesn't keep the lights on. Months passed. I thought I was free of them, but then the letters started coming. Michael wrote first. His handwriting was messy, the words scattered with anger. He accused me of betrayal, of abandoning them when they needed me most. He called me selfish, heartless. Reading it, I almost laughed. He had rejected me for years, and now he dared to claim I had abandoned him. Hannah's letter came next. Hers was softer, filled with apologies that read more like manipulation than sincerity. She wrote of missing her dance lessons, of feeling lost without the structure I had paid for. "I'm sorry," she wrote, "but can you help just this once? I promise I'll do better." But I saw through it. She wasn't sorry for what she had said. She was sorry for what she had lost. Sam's letter was the hardest. His words trembled on the page. He wrote about school, about struggling without the tutor, about how he wished things could go back to the way they were. "I didn't mean it," he wrote. "I was just trying to fit in with Michael and Hannah. Please don't hate me." For a moment, my resolve cracked. I thought of the boy curled up in his reading corner, the boy who once clung to me when storms rattled the windows. But then I remembered his words at the table. "You're not family." He had said it with his own lips, and words once spoken cannot be taken back. I didn't reply to any of the letters. Laura tried calling. Sometimes late at night, her voice raw with exhaustion, she would beg me to reconsider. "They're just kids," she pleaded. "They don't understand the damage they've done." But I stayed silent because they understood enough. They understood how to take. They understood how to mock. They understood how to cut me down in the home I had built for them. And when the money was gone, when the house was sold, when their comforts disappeared, then and only then did they understand the value of what I had given. But it was too late. Now I live a different life. My apartment is small, but it is mine. My money stays in my bank account. My labor feeds my own future. I met someone new, a woman who values me not for what I provide, but for who I am. She looks at me and sees a man, not a wallet. She thanks me for the little things. Dinner cooked, a door held open. Gratitude I had begged for over a decade now comes without asking. Sometimes late at night, I think of Laura's children. I wonder if they sit in silence, remembering the man they once mocked as just mom's helper. I wonder if Michael regrets his sneers, if Hannah regrets her whispers, if Sam regrets his words, or if they simply miss the internet, the classes, the comfort. But regret is not the same as respect, and I will not mistake one for the other. I spent years trying to buy my place in their lives. I thought sacrifice would earn me love. I thought money would buy me respect. But family cannot be bought. Love cannot be forced. Respect cannot be begged. And so I walked away. Maybe one day they will understand what they destroyed. Maybe they will realize that a man's patience is not infinite, that even the most giving heart will turn to stone when mocked enough times. Or maybe they will never understand, and they will carry only bitterness where there should have been gratitude. Either way, I have made my choice. I will not go back. So I leave you with this. Was I wrong? Was I cruel to cut them off? To sell the house? To abandon the family I had built with my own blood and sweat? Or was I finally right to walk away, to reclaim myself from a life where I was nothing more than a stranger with a wallet? Tell me, what would you have done?